Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads, and this is the channel where I like to talk about books, mostly horror books, fantasy books, and science fiction. So this video here, I've been doing a lot of Stephen King content lately, and that's because I love Stephen King. He's one of my top five writers of all time, and that isn't going anywhere. So I thought that I would do my top 10 Stephen King books, and so these are bound to change because I'm currently reading Lissy's story, and so far I'm enjoying it a lot. That could end up being a favorite. I don't know. We'll have to see how it progresses. I'm only an hour or two into it. So I'm gonna, this is sort of tiered, so you might want to stick to the end to see what's number one. So in at number 10, I better double, yeah, these are 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's 10 here. So in at number 10, I have The Green Mile. Now, you may know that this book came out separately. Each chapter or section was published separately. I think there was like 10 separate sections, and they were published monthly, and it was like a big thing at the time. I didn't read them as they were released like that. I ended up buying a used copy of the box set that they sold afterwards, and I remember reading them. So I was working nights at the time, and I was trying to quit smoking, and so I have a very fond, I don't smoke anymore, but I wasn't successful that time around. No, I wasn't successful for at least another 10 years. But I did read the box set in the mornings when I got home from work, and I have very vivid memories of this, mainly because of the medication I was taking to quit smoking. It was a very weird experience. I had like the weirdest dreams that you can imagine. The reading experience itself was very vivid. I kind of miss it for that alone because everything else about that drug was a nightmare. But The Green Mile, I sort of have a weird nostalgic feeling. I think I was drinking a lot of whiskey at the time too, and I would find myself wandering in my backyard, kind of lost, thinking about The Green Mile. It was a very strange time in my life, and so of course I'm going to remember it for that alone. Next up, I have Needful Things by Stephen King. Now, this book, I listened to the audiobook, and Stephen King himself narrates it, and he does a phenomenal job. I absolutely loved hearing him read his own story. There's a few stories or novels of his that he has narrated, and it's kind of rare for him to narrate his own work, but he's not as good a narrator as, just say, Neil Gaiman is, because Neil Gaiman, I could listen to that man read his grocery list and be mesmerized. But Stephen King is very good. Having said that, I absolutely love his narrations. I wish he did it more, honestly. But it's understandable. You know, he's a busy man. He's got a lot of projects he wants to write. And he's also old now. Like, he's in his 70s. So I'm sure it's just something he's not really interested in doing. Next up, I have The Institute, and I remember having a lot of fun with this book. It's very fast-paced. It's very long, and there's a beginning, the opening section of the book that almost doesn't fit until the end, and that's kind of jarring. But Stephen King can get away with this stuff. Despite that one criticism, this book was very fast-paced and very much fun to read. And it's true. If you like the TV show Needful Things, you're probably going to like this book. It's a lot more tense, though, because you're constantly worrying about these kids that the story is about. It's about an institute that takes kids who have these psychic abilities. They're using these kids for something. And so they start off in like tier 1, and then they move on to, I guess, what would be the 3rd tier, and that is where they completely disappear. And it's quite the intense ride. I absolutely loved it. There's a couple things in the end that I didn't like. There was a ghost that was rather unnecessary. There was other things that it's just like, you know, as we know, Stephen King's not the best at ending his books, but to be honest with you, I don't like endings to horror books anyway, because usually if you're going to wrap everything up, like Stephen King likes to wrap every single thread up, you're going to find yourself annoyed, because sometimes that's where your suspension of disbelief is completely broken, because it'll go off from what was interesting and kind of scary into the absolute ridiculous. And Stephen King is not the only one who's guilty of that. Next one might be a surprise to some people, because it's not a King favorite by any means, and that is Under the Dome. I read this one about 10 years ago sometime, and I really enjoyed it. You know, I think this would make a good audiobook. I'm not sure, because I actually read the physical copy of this, and I read the big hardcover book. I have somewhere, it's in storage, but I don't have it up here with me. But I read the big hardcover book, and I do remember it falling on my face while I was reading it. That was kind of painful, because I fell asleep. I was in bed, and oh, it's like a 700-page book. Anyway, it's basically about a town that gets covered in a dome, and it's unknown as to why that dome is there. And it's filled with a cast of very interesting characters. You have a character who, at the very beginning, is told, and this is another kind of weakness of Stephen King, is he'll let you know what's going on, even if it's not necessary to know yet. But you learn pretty early on that one of these characters has a brain tumor in his head, and it's slowly driving him to do terrible things. And he's basically the bad guy of the whole story. And he does indeed do terrible things, and he's one to fear throughout the whole book. And so basically it's them just trying to figure out A, what's going on, B, how to stop what's going on so that they can get out. And there's a bit of a clock running, because all the gases and whatnot that they accumulate in living and whatnot accumulate in this dome, and it's all collecting, and it's becoming more and more poisonous. So that has a very interesting outcome. Actually, this is one of the endings by Stephen King that I actually kind of liked. Next up, I have The Stand. Now, this one, everyone knows what this one is about, and it's at my number 6 for me, which is kind of high. And the reason for that is because I really like the beginning. I like the beginning of The Stand. The second half I don't like so much. It gets to where I was talking about a second ago in regards to breaking not the fourth wall, but breaking my suspension of disbelief, because it starts to get a little ridiculous. But the first half of this book is, you're never going to read another book that's this documented on what a virus that would kill 99.7, or is it 97 point whatever, it's like high 90% of the world's population. You're never going to get that as detailed as this, and it's phenomenal. I absolutely love The Shining for that, or The Stand for that, but it loses its steam after the sides are settled, just good versus evil, and they decide to basically, they're fighting each other to win. And of course one of them's going to win. And I think the biggest disappointment with the recent adaptation of The Stand is that it focuses more on that second half. The first half comes in like memory or backstory, flashbacks, and that was frustrating. I wanted to see the virus. They could have done season 1 where the virus kills everyone off and the survivors find themselves in their different camps, and then the second half be the battle. But they decided to make it all one season, which was probably smart. And it was also smart, if you think about it, to go the route they went. And it's not a bad series. A lot of people really shit all over this series, but honestly, it's not that bad. I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than the second half of The Stand, if that makes any sense. But all the virus stuff that they did, like the virus slowly killing off the planet, I enjoyed that less than the book. So there's a bit of a weird controversy in that for me. And at number 5, I have The Shining. And now everyone knows this book as well because it's very well known. Joey from Friends, he would shove this book into the freezer when it got too scary, and that led to books in the freezer that podcast that I love. That led to their name, Books in the Freezer. The Shining is a very good claustrophobic story of isolation in the dead of winter, being buried in a hotel, a very large hotel where there's only 3 of you. I've talked about this book quite a bit on this channel because there's a big difference between the movie and the movie adaptation and the book, and that all the plot points are pretty much there in the story. The biggest difference are the characters. Jack Torrance, he's an asshole in the movie, but in the book he's very sympathetic. He's battling the demon of alcoholism, and he accidentally hurt his child while drunk one day, and he's like, if he goes back to drinking, he's thinking that he'll just end his life because he can't beat this thing and he can't be there in full capacity that he needs to be for his son. And so you see that he's battling something serious in this story, whereas in the book, yes, Jack Torrance is fighting alcoholism, but he has this shit-eating grin on his mouth all the time, and you sort of get the idea that this guy, he was probably going to kill his family regardless. But the Jack Torrance in the first, in the original content, the book, he's very much sympathetic, and he goes through quite the transformation into a raving, insane guy who's possessed by ghosts, almost. The ghosts of the Overlook Hotel. Next up, I have Duma Key. The reason why I put Duma Key here is because I think it kind of ties with Bag of Bones, but Duma Key is more fresh in my mind. I read Bag of Bones like 3 or 4 times, and I've only read Duma Key once. And Duma Key, the ending for that book really pissed me off. It's just because it's so awful in comparison to the rest of the book. Stephen King, at the end of this book, uses a lot of convenient tools to wrap the story up, and they seriously break your suspension of disbelief, and I really, really disliked it. But I'm not one, as I said, and bad endings don't turn me off from books. The first 3/4 to even maybe 9/10 of this book are phenomenal, and I absolutely loved falling into this world that Stephen King created for this character, because it's another story of loss. But I just remember being absolutely floored. It was just like every time I got to sit down and read it, I was transported to the Keys in Florida, this island that basically was a paradise, but there was something very dark going on in the interim. It's a ghost story, but it's more than that. Next up, now I mentioned this as being a favorite, my Stephen King. Now these top 3 are definitely my favorites, and I had a lot of trouble placing them. So since I named it as a favorite before, and this list is always changing, I decided to put it at the 3rd, and that's Salem's Lot. Now the reason why I put it at the 3rd, actually I don't have a reason, but the reason why it's so high up though, and why I love it so much, is because it has those dirty, nasty, feral, they're not human anymore, they're something else, vampires in it, and Barlow is just one freaky monster. Speaking of Barlow, I won a contest that Merce from Harpies in the Trees did. Not too many people watched the video of my unboxing what she sent me, but this was one of the things that she sent me. It's Barlow, and she put a quote at the back: "I am not a serpent, I am the father of serpents." How cool is that? This is a bookmark that she did for me, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Merce. And Salem's Lot is very detailed in the town itself of Jerusalem, or Salem as they call it, and I could picture this town so very well in my mind. It's a beautiful town. You'd actually want to go live there until, of course, these vampires come in and slowly start to take over the town and consume the town and destroy the town. Stephen King is very good at doing that, and the last book here is at number 1, which I'll get to in a second, is another good example of that. This one ended very well, honestly. In at number 2, I have Pet Semetary. Now this is very much a story about loss. You can tell what Stephen King fears the most, I think, 'cause he writes a lot about loss of a loved one. And this is a story about the fear becoming a reality of losing your child. And that's as far as I guess I'll go with spoilers, but the story basically has a pet cemetery way back deep in the woods where if you bury the dead, they'll come back to life. And it poses the question, what would you do if you lost your loved one, your dearest loved one, and you're being torn up inside because of this? And it doesn't just stop at your one dearest person that you love. It just somehow, for some reason, maybe because of your own actions, it multiplies. The deaths multiply. And do you use this magic formula in hopes that maybe you'll get the person that you loved back, or are you going to keep burying them there despite the fact that they come back completely different and they're not the person you loved anymore? It's very interesting. Descent into madness and what I think grief can do to you when you're in a deep state of grief. And if you were given this magic, what would you do? It's a very interesting book for that, and it's very much a gut punch. And in at number 1 is It by Stephen King. Yes, Stephen King wrote it, I believe. Yeah. Everyone knows what It is about. It's generally a favorite of Stephen King's, and I put it here because of its complexity. And a lot of people harp on the ending of this book, but I had absolutely no issues with the ending of this book. Because I'm just going to put it here that even though Pennywise the Clown is the main monster that everyone knows in It could take any form it wanted. And so a lot of people complained about the form it takes at the end of It. And I have no qualms about that, because it can take any form it wants. You're not gonna be fighting a clown the whole time, even if the movies do that. So I don't think the movies did that so much. But It was a staple of my teens, and I read it again in my 20s, I believe. It's a phenomenal book. It's an onion, really. It's stories within stories within stories. You get the first half, which is the kids' journey, and then the second half, which is the adults, those kids growing up as adults and how they decide to fight this creature. And it's utterly terrifying. One of his there's another part to his ending though that people harp on, and this is something I will harp on. Everyone knows what that scene is. It's the we need to become adults. All the kids decide they need to become adults in order to fight Pennywise the demon, and so they decide to do one act that is. Isn't there something else? Like, couldn't they just cut their palms and like shook hands, did a blood swap thing or something? Did it really have to be that? No, it didn't. But yeah, so there's that issue with it. I'll give you that, but not the form that the Pennywise demon decided to take at the end. That, I think arguing that is kind of ridiculous. But I know some people who are like, oh, the demon became a big, blah blah blah. I'm not going to spoil it. And that was stupid. No, it's not stupid. It could do whatever it wanted. Anyways, this story is brilliant. Despite that one scene that I was talking about, the adult ritual, that was unnecessary and kind of weird, and not in a good way. But Stephen King's known for making those decisions, those weird decisions. Can anyone say later? I loved Later, by the way. Just that very last bit was like, what? So yeah, there's my top 10 Stephen King books. I hope that that you enjoyed this list. I'm sure that I didn't mention your favorite Stephen King books, so please let me know down there in the darkness where or what your favorite Stephen King stories are. And I still have a couple more Stephen King videos I want to do. I want to do the Stephen King books I haven't read yet. And I also want to do my favorite Stephen King adaptations. So look out for those hopefully in the coming months. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. And if you did make it this far, leave a little clown face there in the a clown face emoticon. I believe there's those down there in the darkness. And keep being safe, keep being creative, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.